Hey everyone, this is Kanye from Down the Garden Path with Kanye. I thought I'd do a quick tutorial to show you how to do watercolor flowers. I realized that maybe in the class it was not very clear, and I just wanted to show you how you can do some very simple flowers with your paints and your brushes that you can then frame and they look gorgeous. So enjoy yourselves, give me some feedback. Let me know what you create. Share with me what you create on my Instagram page, which is Down the Garden Path with Kanye. And have fun. So we're going to start with, we need our watercolors. We'll need our brushes. I'm using two brushes. This is my number 8 and my number 12, which basically means a medium and a slightly big brush. I'm going to need my tissue to dab or dry my paintbrushes, my water, and I need my base where we're going to do the watercolors on. Now I like to use a nice matte paper, which means it's not coated, so that it catches the watercolor very nicely. Coated papers, which is like the bottom of the base, is a little bit more it doesn't really do well with watercolors, so we try and avoid painting on that, and we'll use the nice matte paper instead, which is my Conqueror board. So we'll start off by I wet my brushes a little bit, and I'm using a plastic palette where I had some old paints, so I'm just dabbing a little water on them to just bring the paint back to life. And I will do some very simple strokes using the orange, clean my brush, and then pick up some yellow. I will then use that yellow on top of the orange so that you have a section where it kind of blends together. And the secret here is to have enough water on your brush so that when they mix well together. If your brush is too dry, then you will not get a nice blending of the colors. Then obviously we'll use the green for the stems of the flowers. I think these look like tulips. And so I'm picking up a little of my green and just very simply do some stems. Now you'll notice that I did not sketch or anything like that. This is the quickest way of doing it. I rely on the colors to make the forms of the flowers. Okay, so let's try another one. This time I think we'll do some blue flowers. I'm using my number 8 brush. Note how much water, I just want to show you how much water roughly is on my brush. So it's just enough that it's not dripping, but it's quite wet. I'll pick up my blue and I will do some very rough V's and an up-ended V, so that you end up looking like you've done some lopsided crosses, and those are going to be my 3 flowers. Then I clean my brush out of the color, and then I use now my slightly wet brush to pull the color. So what this does is that you have the original color at the base, and then you've kind of pulled it out into the petals so that it comes out now graduated. Yeah. Don't worry if you don't get it right the first time. This takes some practice, and don't stress out if you don't get it right. Just keep trying till you get something that you're happy with. Then I'll use a darker blue for the center of my flowers. You'll notice how when I drop it into the color, it kind of disperses, and that's the great thing about watercolors, the way they mix together. I'll also do my stems. Again, don't worry if the colors bleed into each other. The great thing about watercolor is how the colors bleed into each other and create this just amazing look. So we'll try a couple more actually. It's amazing how when you start this, when you start getting into it, you'll find it really difficult to stop. So do as many as you can. So I'm mixing a red here that I'm going to drop some blue into to make a purple because I want us to try some lavenders. Now for the lavenders, you'll notice I'm just doing some very simple V's. V seems to be quite a regular shape in a lot of my flowers. You'll note that they don't have to be equal and they don't have to face the same direction just for believability. If you look at flowers in their natural habitat, they're never all facing the same direction. So once I'm done with that, I will then pick up a little green for the stems. Yeah, well, I'm just waiting for the purple to just dry up just a little bit. So I already had some green on my very well used palette, and I'll drop some bit of blue into it just to darken it a little bit. And there's still a little purple left on my brush, which is fine. And I'm just going to draw a thin stem. I'm using the tip of my paintbrush to do this so I can have a very thin stem running through. Again, don't worry about the colors mixing together. It just makes it a lot more believable. And then I'll do some leaves on their own, which are also very simply done. You'll just notice that not a lot of work goes into them. But at the end of the day, you get something that looks very, very believable. If you want to learn how to not control your brush too much, try and hold it closer to the end rather than to near the sables. If you hold it near the tip, you then have a lot more freedom for your color to move around, which is what I try and do. I kind of find a nice middle place where I found that I'm able to control the brush quite well. Okay, let's try another one. Maybe not the last one. I think this one will do a rose. So I'm going to use the thicker brush. It's got quite a bit of water on it. And I'm going to pick up my red. And then I do a series of spirals where I'm not adding any more paint to my brush, but I'm letting the water and the paint mix nicely to create something that looks like a rose. And I'll pick up some bit of yellow and use it also on some places of the rose just to show some color variation. So what we're going to do now is remove the color from my brush and then use that slightly dry brush to now pull the color out. You'll see from the outer petals, I'm just pulling a little of the color out just to make the petals look a little bit more natural, and filling it some of those blank spaces, not all of them, because you need to use the white also of the paper. You need the white of the paper to show through. And then I'll pick up a little bit of the red and drop it in to the still wet rose, especially near the middle of the rose. Now this is because when watercolors dry, they tend to be a lot lighter than you'd expect when they were wet. So just so that we have a bit more vibrant color in the middle of the rose, just for believability's sake. This took a bit of practice for me to get, and so don't be depressed if you don't get it the first time. Some of these things, the best thing is in the practice also. You learn also the techniques that really work for you. We'll also put some foliage. Again, was not very careful with this, just some indication of some greenery so that the rose looks believable. So let's try something new now. I'm going to wet the paper, all of it. This is what we call wet on wet technique. Doesn't work so well for me, but let's see what happens with this. So then I drop my color into the wet paper. You'll notice how the color starts off very concentrated and then it seeps out into the paper. And then I'm putting my green leaves. I can already tell, don't really like this, but now that we've started, let's just commit to it and see what happens. Sometimes the wet on wet really works for me, and sometimes, like right now, not so much. So this is just to tell you that it doesn't matter how good you are with watercolors or how new you are at it. You'll always have some issues, and that's okay. We're practicing. So our final piece, we're using some red, again some white V's. The great thing about watercolor is the way where you have a lot of color will show as dark and light, will show as dark, and then you have some places where the color is not so much, so it will show as light, and it just makes a fantastic looking flower. Then we'll use the green for the greenery, and see, we've got some beautiful little pieces that we can actually frame and create these amazing cards. I mean, look at what that looks like once it's framed. Very simple to do, but came out awesome. Let's try with the mirrored gold paper, which is my favorite base at the moment. I mean, look at how that red is picked out by the gold. You know, it looks very professionally done, and it didn't take too long to do these little paintings. It's the way it's finished now with the base that just makes it absolutely awesome. Even the little bad painting doesn't look so bad when it's framed, right? And there you have it. So enjoy practicing. If you don't want to cut your own paper, remember you can buy some of these pre-cut sets from us. I'll have the details below.